Right, guys, welcome back. This is the Above Average FPL podcast. My name is Adam, and as always, I'm joined by Baker. How you doing, mate?
Very well, mate. Very well. It's Ange time.
It's Ange time. This is a fun podcast for us. We've got two guests with us. They are from the Extra Inch. It is a Spurs podcast. We couldn't fit all three of them in here, but we've got Chris and Nathan. How are you guys doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Good stuff, good stuff. So I guess let's start with introductions and, just let everyone know a bit about the Extra Inch and where people can find you and stuff like that.
Sure. So we are a weekly Spurs podcast for nerds. We talk about data and tactics, all the technical aspects of Spurs, and just, we talk about Spurs more generally as well, transfers and whatnot this time of year. We have a Patreon where Nathan produces very detailed tactical videos. We have a Discord, which is part of the Patreon package. And within the Discord, we have an FPL section where we have some very good FPL players, as Baker found out last year. It's a weekly podcast. You can get it for free, you don't have to pay anything. But if you like what you hear and want to get involved with the deep dives that Nathan does, then patreon.com/the extra inch.
Yeah, I've been a sub for a while, and you can't tell it enough. How many people in your Discord?
That's a good question. Sometimes it feels like 1 million, but I think active users, it's probably around, 300, something like that.
Yeah. Easy. So it's not just a get there and there's not many people to talk to. It's busy. There's constant stuff going on. If you're a Spurs fan, I can't think there's a better place to be to talk about football. And there's at least probably 100 people in there that are in that FPL league, and it's a good league. Like I said, I joined and you were like, oh, they're quite good. And I'll be like, I'll be okay. And then I was like, oh, no, they're really good. I think, I've been there 2 seasons in there, and I do all right, and I can't win that league, mate. So it's a really competitive league, really good people, good place to go. And actually, I think for Spurs fans who are in FPL, we all wrestle with our own internal biases. So seeing how other Spurs people are considering whether they can put people in or not is actually really useful. So if you're a Spurs fan, you like FPL, it's a really good place to be. And you've got Nathan.
Hello.
Yeah, your visuals are excellent, Nathan. So you do a lot of stuff for you obviously do the stuff in the Discord, but you share some of that stuff on Twitter as well, don't you?
The data viz stuff, yeah. I there's in our Discord there's a data visualization sort of requests channel. The idea being that I could do scatter graphs of various things. I could do pitch plot stuff, but basically everyone just wants the little player graphs because those are fun, right? So that's mostly what I do.
Nice.
And you're big. You've had a big year, mate. You've had a load of weddings. You on Tifo?
Yeah, that's true.
They all love you.
Well, half the Tifo crew are my mates. My mates have invaded Tifo over the last couple of years. So yeah,
brilliant.
That makes it easier.
I find it odd when you say my mate John. Like, oh yeah, that's John, who I watch all his videos.
John officiated my wedding.
Amazing.
Yeah. But that's an endorsement in itself. You like Tifo, you like FPL, you like Spurs. Get in there.
Excellent. Well, we are here to talk about Tottenham. Obviously, Tottenham are going to be a big talking point from an FPL perspective this season. Came off a relatively bad season for Spurs last year, with Kane obviously carrying everything for us. Scored around 260 points, was absolutely ridiculous. And he's almost going to be a complete no-show for us this season from an FPL perspective, just because Haaland is priced so high, which means in order to find the best players from Tottenham, we need to understand what is Ange going to do with us and how is that going to improve other players. Is that going to be in the midfield? Are we going to see, Maddison become the weapon he was at Leicester? Does it mean Son's going to improve? How does that work for the wing backs and all the full backs, and how, positionally, how's that going to be good for us? So we've had a couple of friendlies, and we've we can talk very briefly about generally the performances of those friendlies, but I'd like to get your guys' take mainly on how we've set up, how it's been it's obviously very different to what we've seen the last 4 years under Conte and Mourinho, and where can we find these sort of hidden nuggets of gold where we want to put some of our money in FPL.
Well, we are cheap as well. Like bar Kane, everybody else has been cut really effectively where they're at. So we are cheap. Probably just start with are you looking forward to the season?
Yeah, really looking forward to the season in a way that I don't think either of us have done for quite a long time. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, we finished the previous season so strongly, and so last season we had such high expectations, and then it just never really got going. And it became obvious quite early that it wasn't going to get going. Do you know what I mean? So we kind of gave up on it, and we're just hoping for Conte to go. And when you spend half a season hoping for your manager to leave, it feels pretty bleak. So we've now got this kind of renewed optimism. We're going to be playing front foot football. We're going to be pressing again. We're going to be having a lot of the ball, which will feel really nice and unusual compared to the last few years. So there's lots to look forward to. It's just this kind of spectre of Kane's departure hanging over us, I think. And until we get that resolved, it all feels like we're in limbo, really, and we don't quite know what to expect.
Where'd you stand on it?
I think he's gone. I do. I've been saying until the last week that I think there's a good chance that he'll stay, that we'll reject offers for him, that he'll buy into the project because Ange is so likable and because there's so much to get behind, and that maybe he'll then even sign a new contract. But I think now there are enough signs that he's leaving that I've committed to the fact that he's going. He's not been involved in marketing material. That's not a good sign. He's the poster boy for Tottenham. If they're taking him out of marketing material, I think that means they're pretty sure he's leaving. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of ITK suggesting that he's decided no, he does really want to go this time, and the reporting is that Bayern will meet Levy's asking price eventually. And so I think that's that. The question then becomes, how do we replace him? Whether we replace him with an out-and-out striker, or whether we use Richarlison and spend the money on a winger. Nathan said in our podcast many times that he would prefer us to spend it on a winger. From what I've heard, we will sign a striker.
I mean, I'm with Nathan on that side. Like, I think the obvious one is we have two players that can play the profile of what we want for it. Am I butchering it? Is it Wahi, the guy in the French league, the Montpellier guy? That it did sound we.
The one with the controversies section on Wikipedia.
Yeah. I saw that link today as a potential one, but again, one, the controversy section on Wikipedia, but also in the younger age, I still don't think that is looking like we're trying to sign someone that is of a higher profile than Richarlison or Son.
There were links for Colomwani, who
yes.
I think is priced pretty high. I mean, real life price pretty high. Sorry, rather than FPL price pretty high. And would be really expensive. Would eat a lot of the Kane budget, as it were. And in my opinion, wouldn't be a drastic upgrade on Richarlison if at all. He's a weird profiler forward. He's like a number 9, but his greatest skill is his dribbling and carrying of the ball, which is a pretty weird profile. It's sort of more of a 90s throwback forward,
Converted
winger type player. So for me, Richarlison and Son really, really perfectly fit the profile of a Postecoglou number 9 in a way that Kane doesn't. And with those two, I think that we're well suited for a centre forward, which is not to say like, okay, overall you're still losing Kane's goals. You've got to replace those aggregately throughout the rest of the team and invest that money. But in terms of a number 9, I think we're already in a very strong place.
And do you think that the number 9, if that is the case, is the one with the number 9 shirt in Richarlison?
I think that like Richarlison, Richarlison has all of the attributes that Postecoglou would want in number 9, right? He fights hard for every loose ball for 90 minutes. He's outstanding presser. He's athletically gifted both in terms of his speed, meaning that he offers a threat in behind, which is super, super important, and he can compete in the air for the ball. He's kind of profile wise, obviously he could be a better finisher than he is, right? But profile wise, he's a perfect fit for Postecoglou, whereas Son is still only has some of those attributes, but he's still just a higher level player. Son has weaknesses with regards to playing up top. We haven't seen a ton of him do that in his career, but his comfort in that position. So basically, I would be quite happy to see them battle it out for that number 9 slot over the course of the first half of the season. And I think that you're going to come away pretty happy no matter who comes out on top out of those as a fight for the number 9 spot.
I mean, they can have both, can't they? If we look at our lovely neighbours, Jesus and Martinelli is kind of that game where there's a lot of switch around in that sense. It's a pretty similar-ish couple of profiles in terms of the number 9 is a very good presser defensively and so forth, and the other guy cuts in well and can bang, so
yeah.
We don't want to say we're copying them though. That would be bad. So we think Kane's gone, and we're not upset.
I think we've reached a level of acceptance. I think as fans, we've just reached a level of acceptance now that we haven't quite got there for him, for what he deserves as a player, because he's by far the best player that we've had at the club in our lifetime, and we've seen some great players come through in the last 30 years, just sort of individually and never quite collating as a team. And it seems to be the same thing over and over again for us. But yeah, I mean, he obviously just doesn't go to one of the two clubs he can't go to, and he's pretty much fine, right? I don't think any Tottenham fan begrudges him doing something different for the last 2 or 3 years of his career or whatever it is before he pisses off to the NFL and starts kicking footballs and stuff.
We should probably ask Nathan what he said when we told him that Richarlison is a £7 million midfielder in FPL before we started.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I think that I would favour Richarlison to take that spot over Son. I would favour us going with Richarlison into the season ahead of spending big on a direct Kane replacement. And with those conditions met, I think that Richarlison is like a 20-goal striker in this system, and that makes him like as good an FPL pick as you could ever reasonably hope for, right?
We need that Kane money to bail out Joe Lewis, don't we?
No comment, Your Honour.
No comment. Cool. So should we move on to the friendlies that we've played and talk about how we've kind of set up structurally and the players in the positions and stuff like that, so that we can sort of piece together how we're going to look? Should we move there?
Let's do that.
Sounds good.
Cool. So got the game up against West Ham here. So for people who are listening on the podcast, I've got the first half and the second half. We obviously changed all 11 players. However, structurally, we remained pretty similar. We were setting up in a sort of a 2-3-2-3 formation, I guess, if you want to call it a formation. So in the first half, well, I don't really need to go through the players, but we had 2 centre-backs, 2 basically inverted full-backs and a 6, 2 8s, two wide guys, and then a number 9. So,
and it's not changed, is it? It's just 45 minutes, 11 subs.
No surprises. I mean, that's kind of what we expected from Postecoglou. It's what he's played at his last 2, maybe 3 clubs. And we got exactly what we expected. So there are inverted fullbacks, but they're not entirely inverted. They're inverted during build-up phase, but also sometimes, one of them will make a movement out towards the flank to create space. The wingers stay wide, certainly in the initial phases of build-up. The 2 number 8s are often extremely advanced, so they'll be in line with the striker and the wingers, but they'll both, sometimes together and sometimes one at a time, will drop in to midfield to receive defeat. So there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of versatility, there's a lot of triangles, and there's a lot of possession. And this has been consistent in both of our friendlies so far. No matter the personnel, this is the way we've played.
Although we've had inverted fullbacks, all of the fullbacks seem to also have made a significant number of through ball runs, and off the ball, and actually spent plenty of time in the box as well. What do you think? Who do you think we end up with here? Because Reggie's not been terrible at all when he's played. It looks like a weirdly good partnership with Perisic that surprised me. Udogie's, I know about the 2 halves of him, but I'm literally in love with the man. Porro. Talk to us about Porro, please.
We've got very divergent opinions on Porro in this role. Go on, Nathan.
I think, well, first of all, none of these guys are getting clean sheet bonuses all season, right? So you're strapped for points there. I think that Porro is a pretty poor fit for the inverted right back role. That he's going to lose the ball in his own half quite a few times. He's going to try things he shouldn't. That defensively, he is lacking for this role. I think that he is an outstanding offensive wing back. And if we end up in a situation where he gets a run of games playing right wing, then I think he'll do pretty well at that. But I definitely have concerns tactically about Porro playing inverted right back against some of the tougher sides we'll come up against. And I'd say more generally from an FPL perspective, I am less high on the idea of our fullbacks picking up attacking points, goals and assists than Windy probably is. I think that they'll probably spend a bit more time in midfield rather than pushed up into attack than we've seen so far in the friendlies.
Whereas I would say we've already seen Udogie score a goal, header, near post header from a corner. We've seen Porro take corners. I think there's enough threat there that if they do cement their places, then they would be really useful options. The problem is that we don't know who's going to start the season because we've got so many options. I think I would be more confident in Udogie at the moment. I think he probably will start.
Yeah.
Although having said that, Postecoglou was really high on Ben Davis in his post-match press conference. Spoke about him being a really good left back, although he's only played centre back so far. And Sessegnon is currently injured. Reguilon, as you said, Baker, I was really impressed with the combinations with Perisic. I thought he looked really good offensively. Defensively, he's been the weakest player, I would say, so far, and that is no surprise. We've seen Reguilon defend for Spurs, and it's not a strength for him. I still think because there's a really good market for him in Spain, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he left and went to Spain before the transfer window closes. So I like Udogie as a starting left back. I can't be as sure on Porro because, for all the reasons Nathan said, maybe Postecoglou will initially go for the sort of more secure option of Emerson Royale, but Pedro Porro is a far superior technical footballer to Emerson Royale. So if you can coach him into the role, then the upside is enormous. I think he's a really good player. And then we've got Jed Spence, who hasn't played a minute yet because he's been injured / recovering from injury. And he's also a really exciting young attacking fullback, really good ball carrier. A bit like Udogie, actually, in the way that he kind of comes inside and carries the ball. So there's another option that we've not even considered. But I would say my main advice is steer clear of Spurs defenders initially, wait to see how things settle, and then maybe look at Udogie and maybe Porro further down the line, especially because he's on set pieces.
There's an argument that the fixtures help us there as well, because the fixtures, whilst they're okay, sort of game weeks 4, 5, 6, where we've got that run of like Sheffield United, Luton, etc. Because we start with Brentford and United, it kind of gives us that window where we can, actually have a watch of how we perform at home and away, if we set up any differently, which I doubt we will, but it just at least allows us to sort of bed in the team for a couple of games before we have to potentially make any decisions.
Yeah, there's no great runs on the defensive side. Even once you play Sheffield United, you're then straight into Arsenal and Liverpool, and it's
yeah. And
even the promoted teams like Burnley and Luton, we're going to their place, which actually it screams goals more than anything, because start of the season, that's when they're still used to winning games, aren't they? They're still looking to press and be on the front foot at home. So, and I mean, centre back situation, like. Well, those guys can go to steal pot from the other day, but what's the saying, Nathan? What do we say about Daniel?
Get it done, Daniel.
It's done. Like, it looks like it's getting further away. It's not getting closer.
Yeah, I mean, apparently Tapsoba is still our top pick, and I think that he is a sensational defender. But I still think even if we get him done, him, Romero, they're all just bad FPL picks because we're going to concede most games. They're going to get yellow cards. Yeah.
I was going to say, from what I saw, Tapsoba's not a particularly calm head at the back, which doesn't particularly complement Romero, right?
I feel differently about that. Windy's expressed his concern. I see him calmer than most people seem to be seeing him. I think I see him as a passive defender.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, the only thing is, I would say, and I mentioned set pieces already, we still have Vio at the club, our set piece coach.
True.
So there is set piece potential for our defenders.
And
let's see if Vio stays.
The way that we play is going to generate a lot of corners.
Yes. Very cross heavy. So you're looking at lots and lots of corners, lots of the ball. You're looking at lots of corners. James Maddison, good corner taker. There's definitely potential there as the season goes on.
And Porro's taken them from the left so far.
Yes, and Perisic took them from the right when he was on the pitch.
Maddison took him first half from the right. Yeah. Well, we must move to Maddison because he's. How have you felt watching him?
I'm so happy he's here. I really love James Maddison. It felt to me like a proper hand in glove signing, the right player for the right club. He's a very kind of silky, elegant, creative player, the kind of player that Spurs fans have loved for many, many years. I kind of wish we'd signed him a couple of years back, to be honest. It was there for the taking. We watched him when he was at Norwich. We watched him when he was at Coventry as well. And I'd kind of been hoping we'd go for it back then, but we've got him eventually. Nathan produced a really interesting video about James Maddison, so I'll let him talk about some sort of technical details, which I think are useful.
Yeah, first of all, Maddison is a magnificent footballer and a profile that I think I agree with Windy that we've really missed from the squad since we sold Eriksen. But I think when you look at the way that Postecoglou wants his team to play, and what I did in my video analysis, I looked at how Matt O'Reilly played in the same role. under Celtic is that it's a lot of 1 and 2 touch. It's a lot of moving away from the ball and away from the play to be an option in the box and a goal scorer, and a link-up player, and supporting the system. Whereas Maddison, and this is partly ingrained from like being such a
big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, big fish in a small pond. Exactly. Thank you, Wendy. Leicester is that he's kind of the main character, and he wants the ball to his feet, and he wants to take a touch to turn with the ball, and he wants to assess his options. And if he's not happy with his options, he wants to play a 1-2 so he can get the ball back and do the same thing again. And that isn't quite Postecoglou's tempo, right? So that's sort of an adaptation period thing he's going to have to come through. Obviously, he remains a very, very talented player. Despite that, the other problem for James Maddison from an FPL perspective is Udogie and Lo Celso, who largely for the reasons that I've just discussed has had a better pre-season so far in the same role.
One thing I probably noticed on Maddison, it comes to that piece of the sort of big fish and small pond at Leicester, is like it felt like it wants to be everything, and I kind of enjoyed it, seeing it at first, because I was like, God, we haven't had this where it's a midfielder wants to shoot. And then after a while, I was like, is he shooting too much? Is it almost indulgent? Do you know what I mean? Is there, as actually he fits more and more in the system? And I guess what you're saying there with Gio is you suddenly noticed it when Gio, who was a little bit more play the system, keep the ball moving, move it quickly, not be, hey, look, I'm on the ball time now. It did feel like everything shifted pace. Similarly, when we probably get to it, is the Richarlison and Kane situation. It felt similar, but I guess what we haven't seen yet is Maddison and Richarlison, and whether that speeds up Maddison as well. That's interesting. Do you not think that Gio and Maddison would play together? So just looking at these here, obviously they have switched, and the other one was, should we call him more of a worker, in that Skip or Sarah played that one there? Do you think that's how it will be?
Yeah, there's so obviously it's a 4-3-3 on paper, but there's a strong tendency that one of the number 8s he becomes the one of the forwards when Spurs switch to defending in a 4-4-2, and the other one is going to head back and defend in a 4-man midfield. And so reflecting that, you have the profiles of those players. You know, Lo Celso and Maddison are sort of kind of number 8s, kind of number 10 type players. Sarr and Skip are much more up and down players, and that also suits what's asked of them in possession, is that Sarr and Skip will sometimes go help out and build up play. Again, they've got a rush back on defense. They're covering a lot of up and down ground, whereas the Lo Celso Maddison player, the O'Reilly player, is going to hang around in the pocket and really look to get in the box a lot. So could Lo Celso play the more box-to-box role? He could do, but when you're already like playing Udogie, Porro, Romero, you're already throwing your wingers all the way forward. You're already playing a very offensive number 8. To then also be like, we're going to play with Udogie and Celso as our box-to-box player. It's a video game lineup, right? It's crazy.
Plus, also what we have to remember is in 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully, we're going to have Bentancur back, and I think he will almost certainly play that role.
Yeah.
Depending on how he heals, obviously, you know, he's had a really serious injury. We don't know how he's going to recover from that, but touch wood, all being well, I think he will play that role, and it means Maddison or Lo Celso. And maybe if we're chasing a game, the other one will come on and we'll go a bit more reckless in midfield. But I can't imagine us starting too many with both of them.
So then we move to the front three. Do you see a world? So Maddison quite often played on the right for Leicester. Do we see a world at all where if Gio was on that position, that potentially Maddison would play the right? Would he fit that profile that Ange would use for the wide men over, say, Kulusevski?
I actually think it's more likely Lo Celso would move into a wide role because responsibility, like obviously Maddison did very well playing wide left previously in his career, wide right a bit too, but the role of the wide player in Postecoglou's 4-3-3 is to carry the ball, drive with the ball, take players on, and I feel like that much better suits Lo Celso. Still not brilliantly, but that better suits Lo Celso than Maddison.
And he's done that for Argentina, hasn't he? He played the right side.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he hasn't done it. How are you feeling about Kulu?
It's tough. He's not a great fit for the role because essentially partly it's his problem, and there's also the Son element too. Obviously we're going to come on to the game in which Son started. Again, the role of the wide player, 1v1 ability is really important. And Kulusevski can beat a man. We saw plenty of him beating a man last season, but a lot of that is like on the counter. A lot of that is when he's already got momentum running with the ball, there's space for him to work into. Whereas in this situation, we're like all parked up in offensive third, receive the ball to feet, and then you've got to try and make something happen from a standing start. And that's a tougher ask for Kulusevski. It's a tougher ask for Son. I think when you got both of them on the pitch at the same time, they're our two best wide players. But between them, you haven't got a 1v1 specialist like Solomon, like Perisic, and that harms us. So someone at some point is going to miss out there, I think.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Kulusevski is really good at the 1 and 2 touch stuff. So, if he were to play inside in one of the 8 roles, he, I think, would look really good.
Agree.
But that might take a while to come to fruition, if it ever does. I really like Kulusevski. I think he's a fantastic player. And I thought he had a pretty good game, to be honest, in the second friendly. Less so in the first. But when you see Solomon play, completely different player. Just they're both highly technical, but Solomon's got that low center of gravity and those sort of real quick hip swivels that get him away from the fullback.
That's because he's like 5'3" as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It probably helps.
But he's stocky with it, isn't he? He's strong.
Yeah.
So there was a training video of Solomon wriggling around about 4 players and getting a shot away. That's not Kulusevski's game. He's not going to do that. He can definitely beat a man, but he wants to then come inside and put a cross in or have a shot. And as Nathan says, we're going to have a lot of settled possession. It's going to be harder for him to do the things that he does well in settled possession. He's much stronger on the counter. So long term, I'm not that hopeful for him in this system, which is such a shame because I think he's brilliant. I think he's such a good player. I really enjoy watching him play.
Feels a bit one-dimensional as well with Kulusevski because he will always do the same thing. I feel like he's obviously going to lean to that left-hand side, and it'll just become very easy to defend against, and we won't want or we don't need that. So I guess moving on to the other side, obviously we haven't got Son in this game, but does Son really work on that far left side?
Not brilliantly. I think again it's like the situation with Kulusevski. When you've got both of them on the pitch, there's something missing, and that's what we saw in the second friendly. So again, looking at Celtic, they had 3 wingers: Abada, who played on the right, Maeda, who played on the left, and both of those 2 players got plenty of goals and assists, moving into the box, dribbling into the box, getting played through and behind. And then the thing with that is that basically only one of them would typically play at a time. And on the opposite wing, whether that was left or right side, would be Jota, who was the 1v1 specialist. So that is obviously Solomon in our squad. So I think if you have either Solomon and Kulusevski playing, or you have Son and Solomon playing, you should be all right. We should be all right as a team in terms of stretching the opposition defence. And then if it's Kulusevski, he can do more of his crossing from out wide. If it's Son, he can do more of his running into the space behind and getting goals. But yeah, again, from an FPL perspective, when you got those three options, and also maybe Perisic if he stays, it's tough to bank on Son. It's tough to bank on Kulusevski. Whereas Solomon, is he priced at 5.5? Is that right?
Yeah.
I think he's going to be really good for minutes. I think if he's Jota this season, then he's going to play most games. He won't churn out the goals and assists like the other two have the potential to, but I think he'll do all right there. So I think Solomon could be a good pick.
That's interesting.
That is interesting. And for those Perisic curious, do you think he's staying?
Probably not.
I think it's unlikely. He's looked really good in pre-season. Can go either way, which is a big strength of his. He struggled defensively last year really badly, but in offensive areas, he was always pretty productive. And in this system, he's looked really at home. But I can't see him wanting to stay. It just doesn't feel like a right fit, Perisic at Spurs. It never has done, to be honest. And there's a market for him. We'll probably get a small fee. I suspect he'll go and we'll get the wages off the books.
Yeah, agreed. And people can't take a chance on it because you've got a few weeks of the season where transfer window's open, and if we get offered anything up right up to the end, then you've suddenly just got a guaranteed transfer out.
Yeah.
Even if there's a rumour that he might start that first game at left wing and say Kane goes, then it's like... And just in general, like, are we undercooked, do you think? By the time the season starts, like, we've only obviously now had two. We've now got fair break. I don't know. I haven't heard any more about whether they're going to try and do any behind closed doors thing. I'm not sure if you guys have heard anything on that.
Not heard anything, but that is something we do tend to do. We tend to have behind closed doors friendlies in pre-season. We've already had one, I think, this year. So I would not be at all surprised if we booked in another couple to get up to speed. Because the other thing is, in both of these games, we've had completely different 11s in each half. So our players have only actually played one half.
Yeah.
One full game of football over two games.
I mean, I
noticed which is crazy.
Quite a lot of teams played last night, didn't they? And I noticed like some of the minutes like now reaching the 70s, 80s, and I'm thinking, God, we're still in 45s, and we've got Shakhtar and Barca to go. That first game at Brentford.
I mean, I do think there's a good point about us being undercooked at this stage compared to other teams. I said to Nathan, we did a little podcast earlier on today, and I said that I thought Kane and Son both look really, really rusty. They both joined pre-season late. And if they're looking rusty compared to their teammates already, the whole team's going to look rusty compared to other teams who've played 2 or 3 more games. So it is an issue. I would hope that they'll get an extra game in to compensate for the cancelled match, but God knows if they can find the time. I also think there's a chance we will sign another winger, by the way, before the window closes. I have heard rumours linking us with one who's now actually signed for someone else, but I strongly suspect we'll get another winger.
This is the time where, because we'll have lots of people that listen to this that are trying to get Spurs insight, that don't listen to you guys. But Nathan, if we sell Kane, who do you think that we should spend the money on for left wing?
I think that, like we said earlier, we've got the 9 to the club already. If I'm Spurs, I think the best option on the market is Mitoma of Brighton. That would be bad news for anyone looking to buy Solomon for this FPL season, because he is a 1v1 monster. Is going to get goals and assists. In addition to that, it's just the best outside wide left option around. He would cost a bomb. He would cost the same kind of money that we would get from Kane, but I think that would be a worthwhile investment. If that's too much, then maybe Nico Williams of Athletic Club would be an option. But I think that's probably where I'd be looking to go heaviest with the budget after centre back, if we were to sell Kane, rather than going for number 9. which again means our options from an FPL perspective, it's hard to bet on any winger because there's going to be rotation. Some might play up top, all that kind of stuff.
It's so tough with only like one game a week for us. Really, there are a lot of players that we have that need to have minutes and need to play football, and we don't have a Europa League or a Conference League. I mean, if it was Champions League, then that'd be a different story completely. But yeah, with the one competition a week thing, yeah, it's going to be a challenge to keep them all motivated, all fit, etc.
Imagine if we saw Mitoma, like from an FPL perspective, like genuinely, like the meltdown of meltdowns, the chaos that would be. Like he's currently in about 40% of teams. Obviously at Brighton, he's 6.5 million, cheap. So if he suddenly made the way across, or even if there was just disruption, so even if it just happened enough that in the next few weeks is that that was the player that we went for, and there was a sign that we would, like, it completely changes a lot of teams. But it does worry me that how well prepped we are. I was just looking. So obviously Brentford played Brighton last night, and Mbumo played 75 minutes, Rico Henry, key player 75 minutes. Most of the defenders were all at 50, 60, 70 minutes. Like, I think Whistle up top played the whole night. Yeah, he did. So Whistle's been there as their number 9 so far in pre-season, and he played 90 minutes. Like, it feels like they're a long way down. But as I said, Flecken's, before we came on, Flecken's a good keeper, but he has looked a little shaky. We have our own keeper in Vicario. How do you feel about him?
So Buddy did our third host of the Extra Inch Podcast, who's not with us right tonight. He did a video analysing Vicario and brought up some concerns. Vicario is coming pretty hotly rated. A lot of sort of the Italian football community are quite excited about Vicario, but there are weaknesses in his game. Not only weaknesses, but his tendency to play reactively, having played for a team who parked the bus all game, is obviously the opposite of what we want our keeper to do. We want an aggressive keeper who's going to come off his line and try to stop things before they happen. So there's some adaptation that's required there from him. I was going to save this for the Extra Inch, but I wonder if with Man United having bought Onana, with us having bought Vicario, with Brentford having bought Flecken in and made him first choice, whether Spurs or someone else looking for a keeper should be looking to bid at sort of half the price that Brentford were looking for on deadline day for Raya, because he's a remarkable keeper, homegrown to Premier League teams. And if we're feeling a tiny bit shaky about Vicario, I think it's worth considering that. Probably still, again, not a great pick for FPL because he's going to let goals in regardless. But as a Spurs fan, I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah, hadn't even considered it, but no, you said it. If you can get him, like, so they want him 40 million, but
yeah,
hey, they get to deadline day.
1 year on his contract.
1 year on his contract, then Christmas comes along. Yeah, well, Christmas comes along. He can sign for anyone overseas at that point, can't he? For pre-contracts, or we can hold it out and we can take him next year. But that was always the feeling on me that 40 million was madness to go out and spend it early on. But we had to do something. 15 and 25, maybe. Then you still spent the same money and you got yourself a backup.
Yeah.
I feel okay about Vicario, to be honest. I think so the way I'm expecting us to be is a team that has a lot of the ball in the majority of matches. There'll be like the City match, the Liverpool match, the Brighton match, maybe even the Arsenal match where possession is much more even or we concede possession. But on the whole, I think we're going to have 60% possession in most games as a minimum. And the most chances we'll concede will be on counter-attacks, and there'll be players running past our defenders on the halfway line and being one-on-one with our goalkeeper. And I feel like Vicario is a pretty good goalkeeper at goalkeeping against one-on-ones. I'm less convinced about his shot stopping from close range. I think there's a lot of examples in the goals he's conceded over the last few years where the ball goes through him or under him. He's trying to react. He's trying to sort of spring up and make himself big, but in doing so, he leaves space underneath him. He's very good, though, at getting down to long range efforts, really good shot stopper from long range. And when Nathan looked at the data, his shot stopping is good. He stands up really well against all other goalkeepers in the top 5 leagues. So I'm not too worried about him. I think he'll be fine on the ball. He seems perfectly competent. You know, a massive upgrade on Hugo Lloris on the ball, who was frankly poor and would not have been able to cope with a Postecoglou's system, I don't think. So I'm not too worried about Vicario. Having said that, I really like David Raya. I think he's a brilliant goalkeeper and would definitely take him in the future.
Just thinking about those, as we were talking about there, as you said, so you just said there you feel will be like 60% possession in most games and so forth. And Brentford were one of the lowest in the league. I think they were 43% average possession. There was a stat that went around for ages, wasn't it? They didn't win a game all season when they had more possession than the opponents last season. Like that's, you know, and we've got what would be classed as, you know, probably the two big sort of transition teams really. Man United and Brentford are both in that sense as strong direct counter teams. But we've got them both first up. It does feel like goals, doesn't it? Those early games.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think as we settle into our system, I do think we'll see some clean sheets. I think, you know, pre-season we've looked a bit ragged because we've been playing a weaker centre-back alongside Romero or without Romero. And also our fullbacks aren't yet used to the inverted fullback systems. So the cover isn't always there. The pressing hasn't been mastered yet, so there's not always pressure on the ball. So teams are exploiting our high back line by having more time in the ball to find through balls. And I think we'll tighten up. I think we will get clean sheets. But yeah, definitely for the early few weeks of the season, be wary of Spurs goalkeeper and centre backs, and I would say avoid.
So Richarlison, 20 goals, get him in.
I was going to say, we now need to say that arguably have we been better without Kane on the pitch so far in pre-season? And
yeah.
I look at the stats here. So I've got the stats from the game against West Ham. Again, the Lion City, whatever, doesn't really bother me because of the standard of the opposition. But the thing that sticks out to me here, weirdly, is the offsides, because it just says to me that we're looking to play. We're getting players to play off the shoulder of the back, the last man, which we clearly weren't doing in the first half. Even though, you know, we've still created a lot of chances, we've still created 2 big chances. You know, we've still had 70+% possession. The 2 offsides just say that we're just a bit more adventurous with a number 9 that sticks up there and actually looks to make a run in behind. And he also, I mean, Richarlison had a couple of goals that he scored that were both offside against the most recent lot as well. So
one of them wasn't even offside.
Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah. So is there an argument to say that we could be better without Kane in the way that he plays football now? Because that's kind of he's kind of almost coached himself into this like number 10 do everything kind of role that he's needed to do for the club, really, and he's adapted his game accordingly, right?
I think it's too tempting right now to, like, as a Spurs fan, snatch at an opportunity to be like, actually, it's fine, it's good, it's actually good. I'm glad that he's going
Because
because
it's a super bad hot take, isn't it? Really?
because it's a trap, right? Because like you'd rather have Harry Kane than not have Harry Kane, right? And I think in terms of like the bedding in period, if we sell Kane, Richarlison's our number 9. We have the players that match Postecoglou's preferred system from last year, from the year before that, from Yokohama, and you settle in a bit sooner. Whereas if Kane stays, maybe he needs to tweak how things are, what the role of the number 9 is, what the role of the winger is, what formation we're basing from, whether Kane would even like maybe play as a number 8, things like that. Start thinking outside the box. Maybe, having only played 2 or 4 games this preseason, it's going to take even longer to get the hang of things through the start of the season. But you'd still rather have Kane than not have Kane, So it's a problem that can be solved tactically for sure.
I do think on Kane as well, though, like in both games, what I've noticed is actually spending time in the box. You're like, oh God, I'm shouting for penalties. Like I'd almost forgotten how little we do that because we didn't spend the amount of time in the game. But we could have had 6 penalties in the first 2 games of this season.
Yeah,
like it genuinely, like they just had to give one in the end in that first half of the game the other day because it was like, well, we're not giving any of these, so we'll give them one eventually.
Yeah.
But there is a chance, it feels different watching Kane because there's more. It definitely feels like there's more dispersion in terms of where the attacks are coming from, as opposed to it's just going to be Kane. So will we have the same amount of sort of lion's share of the goals? That no. So I think what we did see last season is he was just like the best anyone's ever been on bonus points because he was always guaranteed he was going to get the free bonus because nobody else was doing enough and weren't keeping cleans. Whereas there's multiple ways in to the attack this time, so they're definitely those bonus points will dwindle. But hey, I still think if he stays around, we get a crap load of goals.
For sure. Yeah, good point on the penalties. Well, if he stays, regardless of whether he stays, there'll be penalties for someone to score, right? For sure. And if he stays, then he's going to get the ball crossed into him a ton next season. So I mean, we'll work it out. So the thing with these 2 games and the differing halves between Kane and Richarlison is that Richarlison constantly offered to be a threat to run in behind. That opened up space for the midfielders, gave the opportunity for the wingers to get a touch on the ball before they took their man on. Just opened up things for the rest of the team. Whereas Kane, in the first game, he kept doing the traditional Kane thing, coming towards the ball, trying to be also a main character like Maddison, dictate the play, and that meant that the defenders were free to press up, and then therefore their midfielders were free to press up, etc. And then in the second game, he stayed in place, seemed to be following instruction, but he still couldn't get that offside. When I'm profiling forwards, offside is one of the main indicators that I look for stylistic. I think having a high percentage per 90 of offsides is a good thing, basically.
That's good.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a really useful indicator, and you can see it, especially with Richarlison, obviously, that this is the player who offers a threat in behind. Whereas Kane is not, right? So that's I think that explains why we scored a lot of our goals in the second half of these 2 games. But again, it's a problem that can be solved for sure.
Yeah. So if Kane does go, and we just talked about penalties, and there could be more, I've sort of naturally assumed that it would be Son that would be on pens, but anyone got a different view on that?
I think Maddison.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. And I think so. I'm going to start with Maddison in my team, I think.
Ooh.
You're not worried about Lo Celso?
I'm not. No, not initially. Maybe over time, but I think Maddison will be on set pieces. I think if Kane goes, he might be on penalties. I think naturally he's going to be creative anyway, but also gets loads of shots away. You know, some of them are bound to go in. He's a really good striker of the ball. And I feel really confident that we'll have I think we'll score a lot of goals, and I think there'll be a lot of involvement for him. So I feel good about him being a pretty safe pick. That will change if Kane goes and we don't sign a replacement 9, because I'll get Richarlison instead, because Richarlison will be an absolute animal.
And you won't get both.
I mean, I'd be tempted to get both, but that's quite a lot of quite a lot of midfield budget and Spurs players. Yeah,
and there's just so many midfielders. So if Kane goes, Richarlison to 1, but if not,
yeah, go Maddison.
Nathan, you think Maddison as well?
I don't have a super high confidence in Son for penalties. Maddison feels like a strong personality or whatever. I guess. I think it's up for grabs. I think we might see some rotation through penalty duty for a while, especially as players are in and out of the 11.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried a little bit that he's got. Well, he probably won't have, but that James Ward-Prowse thing about him, where he's a great ball striker, great free kick taker. Actually, he's terrible at penalties. He's not terrible, but he just doesn't score pens. And Maddison didn't take pens at Leicester. It was primarily Vardy and then Tielemans, especially when they were on the pitch. I mean, he certainly wasn't he wasn't anywhere near ahead of those guys. So yeah, I don't know. I think, as you said, Nathan, I think it's up for grabs, and we could see it rotated perhaps, which that feels uneasy. I feel uneasy about it being rotated as a fan. Certainly, I think I want a penalty taker that likes to take penalties, that's good at taking penalties, and will just take penalties. And I guess we've been sort of blessed having Kane there, because we just know he's going to step up and take it, right? So yeah, hopefully we at least get someone.
It's going to be weird. I would say on Maddison, though, the one thing, it just, like that personality thing, it does not look like we're watching somebody that has just signed. It's so evident when you watch it. It's like, has he always been in that shirt? Like, he looks like the shirt looks so good on him. Like, it feels like he's been there. It feels like the personality is big already for him. So it wouldn't surprise me from that personality side of it. But I do think, man, Son's been here a long time. And, I've still got hopes that it's time for Big Dog's Son back again. So it'd be nice to know. And are we now thinking, so last thing, has Kane scored his last goal for us?
Yeah, I think so. And it was a penalty against a team from Singapore. Who'd have thought that?
Makes me sad.
What a way to end the podcast, boys.
Okay, cool. Well, we will wrap it up there. So, Chris, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. Really appreciate your insight. It's been great for us to have a Spurs-focused podcast. People think we talk too much about Spurs. Well, we've just given them a massive overload of it today. So, but hopefully it helps. I mean, Spurs are one of those teams with one game a week. We had it last season where both Newcastle in particular, Arsenal as well, I guess they had Europa, but they came alive when when the European football started in terms of the Premier League. And hopefully for us, that's Tottenham that have a big push up the league nice and early in the season, and hopefully we take advantage of some of those fixtures that we get between like game week 3 and game week 5 at least to give us a good grounding. But as we've mentioned earlier, please go ahead and follow the guys over at the Extra Inch. And it's a great podcast. And if you're Spurs-focused Spurs fan, it's absolutely ideal. If you've enjoyed the content today, then make sure you drop a like on the video. If you want to see more from myself and Baker, make sure you hit subscribe. Guys, anything else you want to say before we leave it there?
Pleasure, boys.
Excellent,
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Cheers,
Speak to you guys later.